In a small, quiet town in northern Europe, a girl was born with the destiny of owning the most powerful voice in symphonic metal. Floor Jansen is the protagonist of this near-legendary story, a story that mixes music with magic, talent with hard work, and suffering with success. February 21, 1981 was no ordinary day in the history of Goorl, Netherlands. That day, a girl with a beautiful gift came into the world, a girl who'd have to walk through life full of challenges and hard roads from a very early age. Floor's childhood wasn't simple. Her family moved constantly because of her father's work, and that nomadic life left a deep mark on her. Fitting into new schools, unfamiliar places, and new friends was no easy thing for someone who was already growing at a different pace than everyone around her. Floor was considerably taller than her classmates, and that striking height made her a target. In other words, she was a victim of school bullying. This girl found her refuge in nature, in science, and in books. As a kid, her dream was to become a marine biologist. Can you imagine if, instead of giving us her voice, she had dedicated her life to science? I have no doubt that she would have been a great biologist, but music had much bigger plans for her. From early on, she learned guitar, piano, and flute. She was getting close to her path without quite finding it yet. Her family describes her as a curious, intelligent, restless child, a little woman who needed to understand the world from the inside, to be a participant and take ownership of what happened around her, not just a bystander. And in that spirit of being the absolute main character of her own life, one day, somewhere around age 13 or 14, Floor stepped onto her school stage and performed a musical, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. In that instant, something changed forever in this teenager's life. The feeling of standing in front of everyone, lights on her face, hundreds of eyes watching, ears wide open, her beautiful voice, her heart, and the fleeting nature of it all. That rush of adrenaline made everything click. Right then and there, she understood that being different was not something to be ashamed of. It was her strength, her way of standing out. That night, a star was born, one that would definitively change the history of symphonic metal. And in this story of discoveries, changes, and stumbles, Floor was not alone. Her younger sister, Irene Jansen, was a key piece of the puzzle. She walked a parallel path that also led her to the stage, with a powerful mezzo-soprano voice that would make her a solo artist and collaborator on numerous European symphonic metal and progressive rock projects. The two sisters shared the stage on more than one occasion, and every time they did, the result was a sonic experience hard to forget. Two voices different in timbre and range, raised in the same house, shaped by the same moves and the same years of late-night family music, blending on stage like they never really stopped rehearsing. What a beautiful coincidence that both daughters of that nomadic family from North Brabant ended up singing professionally. There's something about that shared childhood, those nights of constant adaptation to the new, that forged in both of them a relationship with music that went far beyond taste or hobby. For them, singing was a way of belonging, of finding a place of their own in every new city and on every unfamiliar stage. And what began as a refuge for two girls who moved around too much ended up becoming the soul of two extraordinary careers. At 15, Floor started taking formal singing lessons and studying guitar more seriously. But how does a girl from Goorl, a virtually unknown town, end up in the world of European symphonic metal? In 1997, at just 16 years old, Floor was called up to join a local band then called Apocalypse, which would soon rename itself After Forever. Symphonic metal was a genre barely being born in the Netherlands, and this band was one of its very first expressions. At the start, Floor came in as a backing vocalist, but that didn't last long. Nobody who hears that voice leaves it in the background for long. She quickly became the lead vocalist, and with that, the face of the whole group. A metal band fronted by a young woman with a soprano voice that blended classical technique with rock brutality was something that flat out didn't exist in the metal of those years. After Forever had no clear precedent. They were pioneers in every sense. And Floor Jansen, with her 3.5-octave voice, with her ability to move from the softest, most lyrical register to the most gut-wrenching scream in a matter of seconds, was the element that made all of it work. It wasn't just about having an extraordinary voice. She understood the stage. She knew how to give personality to every song, to every silence, to every sustained note. That presence she had first discovered at 13 under the lights of a school musical had grown alongside her, and now it spread across a metal stage with a naturalness that left speechless anyone lucky enough to be watching. Already sure that her destiny was in music, Floor wanted to sharpen her talent. In 1999, having just turned 18 and with After Forever in full swing, she enrolled at the Rock Academy in the Netherlands. There she studied singing across a wide range of styles: rock, pop, opera, and musical theater. She wanted to understand music through its structures, its emotions, its history. 3 years later, she entered the conservatory, going deeper into musical theater and operatic training. Discipline reinforced her natural gift, and Floor Jansen's stature kept growing by leaps and bounds. In 2000, the European symphonic metal scene was boldly shaken up by the release of After Forever's debut album, Prison of Desire. The specialized press was left speechless, a soprano voice riding over distorted guitars, blast beats pounding in the background, orchestral arrangements that gave you goosebumps all over. It wasn't metal dressed up as opera, or opera dressed up as metal. Floor was the heart of a genuine fusion. The years that followed were marked by intense work and steady growth. Decipher came in 2001, and in 2002 something happened that would shift the band's internal dynamics. Mark Jansen, guitarist and co-founder, left the group over musical differences. For Floor, this wasn't a setback. It was a timely opening to move forward. She took on responsibility for the lyrics and melodies, and at just 21 years old became the main songwriter of a band already making noise all across Europe. Invisible Circles, 2004, Reimagine, 2005, and the self-titled After Forever, 2007, built a catalog that was solid, respected, and admired. Meanwhile, Floor began collaborating on other projects, sharing her voice with artists in the progressive and symphonic metal scene. One of those collaborations connected her with someone who would become a recurring creative partner throughout her career: Dutch composer and multi-instrumentalist Arjen Anthony Lucassen, for whom she recorded vocals on the album Universal Migrator Part 1, The Dream Sequencer, by his project Arian. That was the beginning of a long creative friendship. After Forever played festivals across Europe, shared stages with legendary bands, and kept cementing Floor as a central figure in European female metal. Still, outside that metal circle in those years, she was a relatively unknown figure to mainstream audiences. That was about to change, but first, a hard fall was coming in the life of this powerful singer. In early 2009, After Forever announced their breakup. Sander Gomans, guitarist, lyricist, and one of the band's key figures, had suffered severe burnout and couldn't go on. Like everything in life, in the blink of an eye, it can all be over. It was a hard blow for Floor, but true to her personality, she didn't stop. That same year, through her social media, she announced she was building something new. She already had the name, Revamp. And the choice wasn't random. "I like what it means," she explained at the time. "It brings new energy to my career. I like the word vamp, not literally as in vampire, but as a strong woman in charge of her own career. It's short, it's not too mysterious, it's more like me." In January 2010, recording for Revamp's self-titled debut album began in Germany, produced by Waldemar Sorichta and Joost van den Broek, formerly of After Forever. The album came out in Europe in May of that same year. The press welcomed it and the fans followed. Revamp was off to a strong start. But sometimes life catches you off guard, and not always in a good way. In 2011, while getting Revamp's first Latin American tour ready and juggling several other projects at once, her body said enough. Just like what had happened to Sonder Gomans 2 years before, Floor collapsed. Severe burnout forced her to cancel everything: the tour, the shows, all her commitments. This state of deep exhaustion brought on by chronic stress left her completely out of commission for a year and a half. "I couldn't do anything," she admitted afterward in an interview. "I was completely exhausted. I had to stop." That dark stretch was a forced pause, a moment of breakdown, and also of rebuilding. Jansen had to learn, for the very first time in her life, to rest, to be still, to actually listen to her own body instead of pushing past it. For someone who had lived at a relentless pace since she was 16, piling up studies, tours, recordings, collaborations, and commitments on top of more commitments, that forced quiet was almost harder than any stage she'd ever stood on. But Floor came back stronger and turned that experience into music. Revamp's second album, Wild Card 2013, has songs that speak directly to that crash and to the climb back out of it. The track Anatomy of a Nervous Breakdown is, quite literally, a sonic portrait of what she went through, a cry into the pain, an act of courage that would turn into something others could hear and recognize in their own lives. And when the wounds of pain finally heal, new doors always open. It was October 2012, and Floor was recovering from her burnout, taking her first firm steps back towards something like normal, when the phone rang. Nightwish was on the other end. For those who don't know the band, Nightwish is Finland's most important and successful symphonic metal group, and probably one of the most influential in the genre worldwide. At that moment, they were in the middle of a crisis. Their vocalist, Annette Olzon, had fallen ill during the Imaginarium World Tour and couldn't continue. They needed someone who could step onto that stage with 48 hours of preparation, someone who knew the style, the technique, the full scope of the repertoire, a singer willing to take on a nearly impossible opportunity. And Nightwish had the brilliant idea of calling Floor Jansen. We have to stop for a second and think about what that meant for her. Someone just coming out of a paralyzing bout of stress that had forced her to stop for a year and a half. She was barely rebuilding her career, learning again to trust her own body and her own energy. And suddenly she was being asked to step onto one of the biggest stages in the metal world, in front of an audience that didn't know her, with a set list that wasn't hers, in 48 hours. Any reasonable person would have said no, but this was no ordinary situation for a singer like Floor, and she said yes. The band itself made a documentary about those early days, titled "Please Learn the Set List in 48 Hours," and the title tells the whole story. Floor Jansen learned Nightwish's complete repertoire in 2 days, and on October 1st, 2012, she stepped onto the stage of the Showbox Soto in Seattle, Washington, in front of thousands of fans who didn't know her and left them without words. But the moment that truly launched Floor into the global spotlight came at Wacken Open Air 2013, one of the most important metal festivals on the planet. Nightwish played Ghost Love Score, one of the most complex and epic compositions in their catalog. Floor performed it with the power and emotion that sent the performance viral on YouTube. Fans started calling her Ghost Love Floor. This time, yes, millions of people who had never heard her name suddenly wanted to know who this Dutch woman with the impossible voice actually was. And then the next logical step happened. On October 9th, 2013, Nightwish officially confirmed it. Floor Jansen was their new vocalist. The Dutch woman who had left her small town behind, who started out singing in her high school band, who had endured the bullying, the constant moves, and the toll on her health, had just reached the top of the symphonic metal world. With her permanent place in Nightwish secured, Floor stepped into a whole new dimension of her career. In 2014, the band went into the studio for a new album, the first with her as the official lead vocalist. Endless Forms Most Beautiful was released in March 2015 with extraordinary results. The album entered the top 10 in countries like Germany, Austria, France, Switzerland, Norway, Sweden, Greece, Hungary, and the Netherlands. In Finland, the band's home country, it went straight to number 1. The world tour that followed was just as overwhelming. Nightwish, with Floor at the front, filled venues on every continent. In 2016, Revamp disbanded. The singer had no choice. She simply didn't have time to give a band what it deserves. Nightwish was her present and her future, and Jansen embraced that with the same clear-headedness she had always brought to her decisions. That same year came news that deeply moved her fans. Floor was pregnant by her longtime partner, Hans von Dahl, drummer for Swedish power metal band Sabaton. They had met under circumstances that felt straight out of a movie, during a North American tour in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where their respected bands were opening for Iced Earth. He saw her and assumed she was an opera singer, until he caught her drinking whiskey, smoking a cigarette, and listening to Pantera. That's when he knew he was looking at someone completely different. Their daughter, Freya von Dahl, was born on March 15, 2017. In 2020 came the second Nightwish album with Floor as vocalist, Human Nature, which swept the charts across Europe all over again. The machine kept running, her voice kept growing, and Floor's career seemed to have no ceiling. And then, in October 2022, another blow came. And this one was harder than anything before. Nightwish had just wrapped a South American tour when Floor was 41 years old. As part of her routine medical checkup, she had a standard mammogram. What they found left her in shock: breast cancer. The tumor was small and non-aggressive. Because it was caught early, it hadn't spread, and the prognosis was good. But the word cancer saddens, paralyzes, and weighs on you. Its impact stops you cold. All at once, your priorities rearrange themselves, and you're reminded with brutal clarity that the body is not invincible, even when your willpower seems to be. Floor announced it publicly with a letter on her social media, addressed directly to her followers. And in that letter, she did something that perfectly defines who she is. She shared her truth, called for awareness, and told her story. She explained that she hadn't felt a thing, that she only found out through the mammogram, and that if she hadn't gone and had it done, the tumor would have gone undetected for months, maybe even a year more. She urged every woman reading to go get that checkup. A mammogram saves lives, she wrote. If I can inspire you to take care of yourself, then something good will come out of this diagnosis. The day of the surgery came, and the tumor was successfully removed. A few weeks later, a legendary night unfolded in the symphonic metal world. One where it's said that Floor Jansen stepped back onto the stage for the first show of Nightwish's new tour leg, and also a new chapter in her personal life. It was a deeply emotional night, and during one of the most intimate songs in the setlist, Floor broke down in tears right there on stage. In an atmosphere of warmth and nostalgia, the musicians and the audience held her in that moment, giving back a little of all the love she had given them. And we were left thinking of her as a metaphor for redemption, for strength, a woman who had just defeated cancer, singing about the setting sun in front of thousands of people who love her. In the previous painful chapter of her life, she'd gotten a tattoo, the owl on her right shoulder, Nightwish's symbol, inked into her skin during her recovery from the 2011 burnout. She had originally thought about a phoenix, that mythical bird that rises from the ashes. But she chose the owl. At the end of the day, the message was the same. Floor Jansen is someone who is reborn. In March 2023, Floor Jansen released Paragon, her first solo album, a record that blends influences from metal, pop, and rock, and shows her in her most personal and uninhibited form. "I've reached my paragon," she wrote when she announced it. "I am a lucky woman who has managed to make an album I didn't know I could make." Years and years of formal musical studies, many bands, dozens of collaborations, a marriage, a daughter and a family, burnout, cancer, 2 studio albums with Nightwish that crack the top 10 across Europe, and a voice that can shift from softness to raw power, with a technique that very few singers in the world, in any genre, can match. What is it that makes Floor Jansen unique? It's not just her extraordinary voice. It's the combination of preparation and passion. It's having studied with real academic rigor while at the same time throwing herself completely onto the wildest metal stages. It's having fallen and gotten back up even stronger. It's the self-confidence and the boldness that led her to learn an entire repertoire in 48 hours, because you don't turn your back on opportunities. But there's still something more, something that defines Floor Jansen beyond her technique or her career: her soul. In an industry that often rewards image over reality, Floor has always chosen to be exactly who she is. She didn't hide her difficult moments. She opened her heart, shared her pain, found a lesson and a way to help others in every hard chapter, and never built a fantasy around herself. Instead, she spoke to her audience directly, with the same warm and honest voice she sings with. And that created something no marketing strategy can manufacture: a real connection. People who love Floor Jansen don't just love her for her voice. They love her because in her they recognize something true and genuine. Tuomas Halopainen, the heart and soul of Nightwish's songwriting, once said something that perfectly sums up the place Floor holds in the band. If she ever decided to leave, Nightwish would disband. And there's no more powerful statement about the weight one person can carry inside an artistic project. All of this and more is Floor Jansen. And what unites every one of those moments, what runs through her entire story from beginning to end, is an unbreakable will to keep going, turning every obstacle into fuel. A woman stepping up to a microphone and giving everything she has, always, no matter what happened the week before. And as long as that voice keeps sounding, symphonic metal fans can rest easy. Their queen is right where she belongs.